This is my own personal informant. Nothing to do with the Knights of Favonius.
Does anyone else find it strange that Kaeya, who's effectively second in command of the governing body of Mondstadt, has a lot of really sketchy connections? I mean, I understand the importance of having an information network and all, but Kaeya's a cavalry captain. And cavalry units historically aren't really the primary information pipeline, so to speak. Typically, an army's cavalry are more combat-focused. At best, they might scout ahead of a marching army to ensure that the area was safe, but full-on recon isn't really in their job description. Now, Eula, on the other hand, is the captain of the reconnaissance company. She's the one who's supposed to actually have a deep information network, because, that's her job, to get intel. I get that Grandmaster Varka took all the horses and all of Kaeya's cavalry soldiers with him on his expedition, but somehow that doesn't really seem like the best reason to start messing around with gathering intel from criminal organizations, And Kaeya has some serious connections, not just within the local syndicates. With how wide his reach seems to be, I hardly think he started all of this recently. And it's not like Varka's been gone all that long, either. What's really weird about this network of Kaeya's is that it apparently has nothing to do with his work as a Knight of Favonius. It's something he does on the side as a, personal project, if you will. Guy's got some strange hobbies. Let me be very clear. This is not a Kaeya analysis video, although we will be doing a little bit of that. This is part 2 of my Teyvat world structure series. And what does the structure of Teyvat's world have to do with Kaeya's shady connections? Well, you'll just have to watch and find out now, won't you? Also, really quick before we dive into the meat and potatoes here, I just want to remind you all that this is a theory video. I do my best to make sure that all information presented here is as accurate as possible, and from this video onward, I will be citing relevant sources in the description box below with video timestamps. This is to encourage everyone who watches my videos to do their own research and draw their own conclusions, because theories are not canon until MiHoYo says so. That is my disclaimer. Now we can talk about Kaeya's shady dealings. So, Kaeya specifically appears to have the most ties with the Treasure Hoarders, specifically. This was most blatantly illustrated during version 1.3's Lantern Rite quest, Currents Deep Beneath the Lanterns, where he puts us in touch with an insider within the Treasure Hoarder organization. But this isn't a one-off occurrence. And Kaeya on the whole knows way too much about the Treasure Hoarder's inner workings to just have one singular informant. For example, in the daily commission A Surprise Gift, you have the option to ask Vile about gift ideas for Jilliana. Doing so reveals that not only did Jilliana used to be a treasure hoarder, but that Kaeya was the one who knew she was being exploited and through Vile instigated the following chain of events that resulted in the ruin of this specific branch of treasure hoarders that were exhorting Jilliana herself. But if the treasure hoarders have a multitude of branches that operate independently, the only way Kaeya would be able to reliably suss out this kind of behavior would be to have an informant in multiple branches. I'm looking at you, Vile. And that's kind of weird when you think about it. Why in that commission would he move to crush one specific branch instead of trying to bring down the entire Mondstadt operation? They are a criminal organization, after all. Regardless of their perceived level of threat to Mondstadt's safety, it feels like they should still be dealt with by the Knights, don't you think? And with the level of intel he has, you'd think that'd be possible. He could at least deal them a severe blow, but he doesn't. Either he really values the intel he gets from them, enough to let them commit their crimes anyway, or he has other motives. And that might be more likely than you'd think. I bet you don't remember Kaeya's story quest, Secret Pirate Treasure, but he sent us on a scavenger hunt that also ended with us running into and later capturing an overzealous treasure hoarder, but began with Kaeya claiming he was descended from pirates. Currently, there are 2 playable pirates in the game, Kazuha and Beidou, both of whom use treasure hoarder medals for talents and ascension alongside Kaeya. Yes, I know Yanfei, Bennett, and Xinyan do too, and that's not the point. The point is that, well, pirates, treasure hoarders, pirates like treasures, so treasure hoarders are like land pirates? Okay, fine, I admit it. That connection is kind of a dead end. And Kaeya claiming to be descended from pirates and his weird connections to the treasure hoarders seem like completely separate things. Heck, the pirate thing might not even be true. It might be a total lie. And Kaeya's a pretty weird dude, so maybe he just likes messing with the treasure hoarders in his free time, like it's his way to unwind or something. There really might not be any meaningful connections there at all. Sure, I could really go way out there and say something like, I don't know, the circular shape in the center of the insignia matches Kaeya's eye or something, but that seems more like a coincidence than anything else. I mean, that shape is everywhere. Actually, that symbol isn't that common, at least not the primogem within a circle. Usually we just see the primogem star on its own. But when I first noticed this in the treasure hoarder insignia, I thought the symbol was supposed to be Mora, since, treasure hoarders like money and all that. But Mora has a triquetra on it, not a four-pointed star shape. The only round thing with a primogem-like star in the center of it is this stylistic depiction of the sun, as seen here in Ningguang's story trailer. And that would make perfect sense, since a sun is a star, so a star shape within a disk is a totally reasonable way to represent the sun. So that checks out. But if we assume that this disk on the insignia really is a stylistic depiction of Teyvat's sun, then I gotta ask the question, why did the treasure hoarders operate under the symbol of a raven circling the sun? Well, there's nothing about it in-game, but I just happen to know of a few raven myths that might shed some light on this query. The most notable myth comes from Native American folklore. The exact story varies from region to region, but generally it's held that ravens are both trickster and creator gods. This is because the raven is usually the one who brings the sun, the moon, and the stars to mankind, but does so through some underhanded means, usually like thievery. What's interesting to me is that Genshin is basically obsessed with the moon and the stars, but has basically nothing to say about the sun. Sure, the sun is also just a star, but it's a very specific type of star, a planet-hosting star. That makes it special. Now, outside of the Americas, ravens have a much broader range of roles to play, or at least their Corvus family members do. And we're going to be talking about multiple types of birds from the Corvus family, and I'm going to be using all the terms interchangeably, so yeah. Anyway, in the Old Testament, for example, the raven is the first bird Noah sent to look for land, not a dove, not originally anyway. And then if we move to Southeast Asia, we can also find a Hindu sage in the form of a crow who recounts the world's history, having survived several of its destructions himself. Incidentally, this same sage lived on a wish-fulfilling tree found on Mount Meru, also known as Mount Sumeru, which is completely irrelevant to this theory, I just thought it was a cool tidbit. Now, in countries like Greece, crows are often associated with prophecies, especially those foretelling disasters, which is why in later years they also became associated with witches and harbingers of death. Crows were also used as a symbol on the coat of arms for the Viking colonies of the Isle of Man. And of course, we can't talk about the Vikings without talking about Norse mythology, which is also where things get interesting because Kaeya's surname, Alberich, was a dwarven king from Norse myth. Now, the most famous crows or ravens here belong to Odin, king of the gods. These birds are called Hunin, thought, or Munin, memory, and were said to act as the god king's eyes. And Kaeya's got something funky going on with his eyes. Suspicious. But what on earth does all of this have to do with Kaeya and the treasure hoarders? Like, it doesn't make any sense at all. It's a bird, there's suns, okay, I see the mythological connections, it's fine. Why does it matter? Well, let me go off on a little tangent here, and we'll circle back to this in a second. So, Kaeya's first name is weirdly a point of debate among theorists because it doesn't have a very clear root. Most theorists seem to agree that his name is of Tamil origin, bearing the meaning monsoon flower, but the evidence to support this is actually fairly weak. Reddit user Dynamocha, however, suggested that since his last name was Alberich and of Germanic origin, that Kaeya's name might also share the same Germanic roots, and thus settled on an alternate spelling of Kaeya, Kaeya. Now, Kaeya, with a J, has a lot of meanings depending on the language. Usually it means purity, life, or the sea, but in Swedish, Kaeya is a form of Kaeya, and Kaeya means jackdaw, which is a bird. But not just any bird, it is a small version of a crow or a raven. And what's funny about the jackdaw specifically is that it's a bird very famously known for the tale The Vain Jackdaw and Its Borrowed Feathers, wherein the jackdaw decorates itself with peacock feathers and tries to pass itself off as a peacock. And of course, Kaeya's constellation is a peacock. The word Kaeya, or jackdaw, is related to the derogatory term Kaeya, which means drunken jackdaw, or drunk as a jackdaw. Historically, this term came about because of outdoor beer brewing, where jackdaws would swoop down and swipe fermenting grains, thus earning them a reputation of liking alcohol, or at least beer, which is hilarious given how much Kaeya likes to drink, and the fact that he was left at a winery. And the fact that apparently his code passphrase is,
Wine begets wisdom.
but you know who else likes to drink? Pirates. Which is also funny because remember, Kaeya insisted that his grandfather was a pirate and that Kaeya inherited his eye patch from him. Now, pirates allegedly wore eye patches because they were constantly going above and below deck. On average, it takes the human eye around 25 minutes to adjust to the dark, so keeping one eye covered allowed them to adjust to darkness instantly just by swapping which eye their patch covered. So yeah, Kaeya actually could have just inherited the eye patch from his grandfather, and it does kind of solidify the pirate connection a bit. And yeah, we can talk about the implications of this as per Kaeya in another video and why he might wear it all the time, but for now, let's just roll with the pirate thing. Weirdly enough, I have always associated jackdaws with pirates, which might be because I've watched way too many pirate movies where the ships were named Jackdaw. But like I mentioned earlier, jackdaws are the smallest members of the Corvus family. And there's another Corvus reference on every pirate ship. You know what that reference is? It's the crow's nest, you know, the lookout post on the main mast. A little more digging, and I discovered that the term's crow's nest actually comes from Viking sailors who, instead of carrying around parrots like a conventional pirate who didn't carry around parrots, they actually just, took a lot of parrots from the southern islands because they were really easy to sell because they didn't take that much food, so they were easy to transport. Anyway, Vikings had crows for practical reasons. Just like with the story of Noah's Ark, where he released a raven to find shore, if visibility was poor out at sea, Vikings would release their crows and plot their course according to the crow's flight path. Worth pointing out that this is based on a legend and may or may not be true in origin, but hey, we mostly talk about myth anyway, so it's a moot point. Now, I bet you that whenever I mention pirates, you all instinctively think treasure in your head, and that's totally valid. That's kind of what made pirates so famous and kind of popular to begin with, was the pirate treasure. But remember, Kaeya's story quest is called Secret Pirate Treasure, so yeah, connection is very valid. But you know who else likes treasure? Well, yeah, of course, Sealy's like treasure, and yeah, Paimon does too, but I was actually thinking about the Treasure Hoarders. And Treasure Hoarders were already a weird bunch of misfits, but have you ever noticed that they're one of the only enemy types we never actually kill? When we beat them, they don't crumble into stardust like everyone else. They just retreat and smoke bomb the heck out of there. And you have to admit, their lineup of, roles is kind of odd for petty criminals. I could write off the grave diggers as grunts that dig up things like ancient burial sites, but what the hell are those potioneers? It seems to me that with their extremely proficient alchemy abilities, they'd be able to find much better employment that's stable, legal, and, pays better. Also, why are they looking for test subjects? Test subjects for what? Are the grave diggers there to bury the failed test subjects? I have to know. But it really does bring up the question of what the heck are the treasure hoarders even doing in these ancient ruins? Members like Ynir are researching ancient gods, which is so strange because the only other people doing that are like Sumeru researchers or the Abyss Order. Or, maybe sometimes the Adventurers Guild, I guess. So if treasure hoarders are researching treasures and the gods of ancient worlds, just like the Abyss Order is, and the Abyss Order is made up of a faction of individuals turned monsters from the nation of Khaenri'ah, and Kaeya is heavily involved with the Treasure Hoarders and is also from Khaenri'ah, then is it at all possible that the leaders of the Treasure Hoarders might also have deeper connections to possible survivors of Khaenri'ah's downfall that didn't get turned into monsters? What if they escaped Khaenri'ah's downfall and fled to Teyvat through the Dark Sea, masquerading as pirates? We've talked about Khaenri'ah being an underground nation, but that might not be completely true. Consider this passage from Kaeya's 4th character story that talks about the day he was abandoned at the Dawn Winery by his father. "This is your chance. You are our last hope." Kaeya's father squeezed his son's lean shoulders as he spoke, seemingly looking right through Kaeya to someplace far beyond. On the other side of the horizon sat their distant homeland of Khaenri'ah. Kaeya would never forget the look of both hope and hatred in his father's eyes as he uttered those words. I'll draw your attention not to his father's words, but to the direction of Khaenri'ah. On the other side of the horizon. That's not underground. Even if the actual kingdom itself were underground, the way they arrived in Teyvat might not have been. For those of you who think this is a bit of a leap, let me point something out illustrated well by Twitter user NANBEIDOU. The spiral abyss, the treasure hoarder symbol, and the symbol of the eclipse on Surumi Island mural are all basically the same shape, and depicting probably the same thing. And I've already argued in this video that Khaenri'ah is connected to the spiral abyss, the entrance of which is way out at sea on the remains of what used to be the tallest mountain in Mondstadt. And since the Dark Sea is basically anywhere that's not Teyvat and includes things like island landmasses, who's to say that there aren't more entrances to other places out there somewhere? In the same video I mentioned earlier, I also argued that the domains we descend to are likely part of, or at least connected to, Khaenri'ah. But don't you think it's weird that a nation thought to be underground has a sky? Some domains even show a full moon, just like the one in Teyvat, while others, like this domain in Inazuma, have the sun in full view. And it's worth mentioning that the Abyss Order, as well as Dainsleif, have design motifs that are littered with stars and galactic patterns. And sure, those could be more of an abyssal thing, but Albedo is also from Khaenri'ah, mostly, and he still has all of these crazy star and solar motifs, despite not having any actual ties to the Abyss. Treasure Hoarders also have belt buckles with stars on them that match their insignia, and they have those weird potioneers that throw offensive alchemical creations at us to attack, and Khaenri'ah was known for its incredibly advanced alchemy. In other words, it's actually unlikely that Khaenri'ah is underground at all. It's far from Teyvat, to be sure, like way beyond the horizon and maybe beyond the Dark Sea, and maybe you have to either sail across the perilous Dark Sea to reach it or brave some unmarked underground tunnels, who knows? But if Khaenri'ah is really, truly above ground, then we cannot ignore the possibility that the underground is actually Teyvat. But to find out how that's possible, you'll have to stick around for part 3. Yes, part 3. I never meant for this to be a 3-part series, but I had to set up the foundations for this next video, which is already going to be a bit longer than I'd like. Part 3 of the world structure theory is already under development, maybe about 30% complete at the time of this video's release. Now in that video, we will actually be exploring some history of Teyvat, what we actually know for certain about Teyvat's physical structure, some mythological inspiration, a hypothesis on what the world actually looks like as a result of all those things that we know, and then we'll take a look into what implications all of that has on the plot itself. And trust me, it's a bit of a doozy. So buckle up, guys. I don't expect this will be a smooth ride. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys in part 3.